What is going on, everybody? We are back fresh off the NFL Combine. We got free agency starting in a couple days. It is a very, very busy time of the year, especially on this channel, but for all like content creators. But honestly, I'm trying to make the most of it. So today we are going to do something which I think you guys will really enjoy. I know everybody loves mock drafts. So Nick and I are going to do a first round mock draft, first of the cycle for us. I haven't even done a mock draft on my own. So this should be a really fun experience. But more than anything else, it'll give us a little bit of time to kind of talk through all of these prospects, kind of where we see them. We'll try to keep it predictive as well on like where we see these players landed. But first, foremost, Nick, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good, man. We're off the precipice of the combine, so as we're getting into this draft process, getting more familiarized with players and just seeing like what teams are going to be looking for which players in this specific part of the draft. I'm definitely looking forward to this, man. It's gonna be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, I mean, the combine is just all about, it's an information gathering process, the medicals, the interviews, things of that nature. Some of that stuff we're obviously not privy to, but, getting testing measurements and stuff like that. We talked about that last episode that it was important for us. We wanted to see it for specific guys. So we got some of those questions answered, maybe not all of the ones that we were, searching for, but that's such as life, right? So just before we jump into this, if you guys could do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you follow me and Nick on Twitter and all that stuff. It's a free, easy way to support our content. Makes this thing really roll. So without further ado, man, you ready to jump into this?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Okay. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to take the odds and Nick is going to take the evens and kind of go through this thing one by one. We'll talk about each of these players, for a couple of minutes as well. But I don't think that there is any real shock as far as who's going to go number one in this draft. It's going to be Fernando Mendoza. I don't necessarily consider Mendoza to be a blue chip caliber prospect in the eyes of, how I viewed Caleb Williams or Drake May a couple cycles ago. But I do think he's a very good prospect overall. Like currently, he's the number 3 player on my board. I think the accuracy, especially to the sideline, intermediate area of the field, is a real superpower for him. He's really, really tough, likes to get the ball out on time. I think there are some things that I worry a little bit about just with, the Indiana offense is a very difficult projection to the league. There's not a lot of post-snap processing, but there are enough flashes that I think he can do it. It's just something that he wasn't necessarily asked to do in college. So there's a lot to like on Mendoza's film. Another thing that I would just point out is like the intangible factor of he played his best ball in the best moments. Like you look at late in games against very good opponents. He just consistently rose to the occasion. And I think that stuff matters a lot for quarterbacks, man. So Mendoza entered the season as my QB1 coming out of summer, and he is going to be a Las Vegas Raider.
You mentioned the toughness and just like the factor of playing like his best moments in the biggest situations that absolutely stands out with him. Just being able to stand in, take those huge hits, especially down the stretch, like guys like some of those hits he was taking in like the college football playoff were downright illegal with like how often they were like biting at him low. Like it was insane like the amount of like times he just got back up and he was good to go. You can't question
Yep.
that dude's toughness at all.
100%.
Yep. And number 2 overall, I think this one is looking like there's a pretty obvious favorite right now coming out of
Hmm.
it, and it's Arvell Reese out of Ohio State. I see Reese as a little bit more as not just an edge rusher and not just a linebacker. I kind of view him in that Leo Chanel, Dante Hightower kind of mold where you don't want to put him in any one role. You want him to be able to fill multiple hats. Like if you need a guy to get on the line of scrimmage and maintain the run, secure the edge and all that, and like provide some like pass rush juice on third down, he can absolutely do that. He can also fit the run really well because he has such great range, but he also has such great pop on contact. So I really view Reese as that type of player who is going to fill multiple roles, not necessarily one. And the reason I don't really see him as necessarily like a full-time edge defender, he's a
Hmm.
really powerful player, but I don't see a lot of like overall bend in his game there's like a lot of instances where he gets like maneuvered up the arc, even on inside rushes, where he just can't really flatten and turn that corner. So for me, like I see Reese as more of like a two role type of player as opposed to like one role fits all.
100%. I think that Reese, the versatility, the things that you can do with him defensively. I think my favorite deployment of him would be as an off-ball linebacker who, if you want to get into, some different spacing, kind of like the Eagles do with like Zach Bond from time to time,
Yeah,
rotate him down to the edge. You mentioned like the ability to lock out and set the point of attack. I mean, this dude, unbelievable physicality at the point of attack, block destruction, all outstanding, and then just the explosiveness. He is one of the most explosive linebackers that I have ever seen that actually knows what he's doing. I think I think his athleticism is so impressive that it almost underrates how far along he is in his development from a processing standpoint. So he's an outstanding prospect to me. I have two blue chip players in this class. He is one of them, with the small caveat that I will remove that blue chip moniker for him if someone asks him to be a full-time edge rusher because I just don't think that there is enough on the film. I think he does have some good pass rushing traits. I think the burst off the ball, there is definitely flashes of that. Some of the speed to power conversions earlier in the season when he actually had chances looked pretty good. But
absolutely.
there's a very small palette of pass rushing moves, and I'm just not comfortable. That's not a bet that I would be comfortable on taking. I understand positional value, but he's an excellent, like I said, blue chip caliber off ball linebacker with the potential to be what I would consider a good all around edge rusher. To me, I'm going to take the more sure thing, and I'm going to morph my defense around a really versatile player. So, completely agree with what you're saying there. I hope that that is going to end up being like the consensus kind of deal because it seemed like there was some talk about where the Jets could go at two. I think that the draft is really unpredictable all around this year just because there's not a ton of like blue chip caliber players, and it's a unique draft because so many of the best prospects are from like non-premium positions, right? Like off-ball linebackers really strong, and that's just a position group that we don't think of normally having a ton of talent that's ready to play right away. It's usually a developmental position. With the
Yep.
Cardinals, it is really difficult to kind of peg what direction they could go. I do think that their defense has a lot more pieces than I think people realize on it. The Josh Sweat edition last year was pretty good. Buda Baker's getting a little bit older. I really loved what I saw from Walter Nolan last year and very limited sample size before he got hurt. So there is a lot of questions there, but for me personally, because it's wide open and there's not a quarterback here that I'm necessarily wanting to pull the trigger on, I'm
Yeah.
going to go with Sonny Styles. So Sonny
Yeah.
Styles, the number one player on my big board right now, just an unbelievable prospect. Same things as Reese, the burst, the patience. Styles is one of those guys who it is almost shocking whenever he's not in the right place. It is unbelievable processing, gap integrity, so sound. I think, talking to him at the combine, like him telling us like automatically, he already knew like things that he wanted to work on. He was like, I feel like I have the tendency to play a little bit high. He's 6'5". It didn't matter in college because he has the capability of like just like locking guys out. He was just so much stronger. He's like, yeah, I play a little bit too high. I need to get better about my pad level, being more consistent. I'm also like way too athletic and instinctual and coverage to not have like more playmaking. And those were literally the two things that I had as like negatives on a scouting report. I was like unproven playmaker, can play a little bit high at the point of attack. So the zone coverage stuff, I think from Styles, a lot of potential with him being a former converted safety. To me, Arizona just needs to take the best player here, and that's Sonny Styles, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, this is definitely one of those where you don't want to overthink it. You don't want to like take a player who's like a tier down or force like a quarterback need at this type of spot. You just want to take the best available player, and it's obviously Sonny Styles at this juncture. Fully agree on what he provides in terms of just like his ability potentially in coverage, his absolutely like insane range, sideline to sideline. But just also, like you said, he's just never out of position, despite the fact he's like one of the best athletes we've ever seen at like the
That's
off-ball linebacker position.
That's the thing is he's an S tier athlete, but when you watch him play, he's so in control. And that's
Yes.
just usually not the case with these type of players. You just usually get one or the other, and it's just a perfect encapsulation of like how impressive of a prospect he is. And I just don't care about the positional value stuff, man. Like I just don't. I think if you can get a special type of off-ball linebacker because there's so few guys that can allow you to do everything defensively, that is worth that this type of pick, especially in this draft. So, you can find competent baseline starters at linebacker all throughout this draft and free agency every year. But special players like this don't come around every year, man. Like Styles, I've said this a couple of times, but he's the best linebacker prospect that I've ever evaluated. So I think extremely highly on him. I'm betting on him all day long.
Totally agree on that. And sticking to the value of we don't care about positional value here in terms of like, the players and stuff. I
Hmm.
really think that the Titans, I wasn't necessarily like huge on this at first, and I started thinking more about the depth of the draft and like what they could do at wide receiver. And I just really think taking Jeremiah Love here at 4, considering how weak the running back class is, makes more and more sense each time. And honestly, with what Love can provide in terms of explosive plays, that's the game right now on the ground. It's one of those big things that teams are looking for more and more is just, can you create explosives on the ground? And Love does that every single game. There are instances where he's outrunning, players like D'Angelo Pons, who are like over 40-inch vertical players that just they have so much explosiveness, and he's just
Hmm.
like outstriding them along the sideline. And not just that, Love plays with such like good balance through contact, but he's also like really good at making guys miss in space. Like, he's not necessarily like the most fluid, but he's very explosive out of his cuts, just being able to generate that space. You really see that with his game. And honestly, like, thinking of like potential NFL comparisons, the way he just strides it out and like some of his like big play ability, it really kind of reminds me a little bit of like Todd Gurley, like when he was coming out of college in terms of like all that stuff. So I really think Jeremiah Love makes a lot of sense here, even if the entire offensive line is not necessarily up to snuff. But I mean, in this type of draft, if you have questions about guys that you might not feel very comfortable with, just take the sure bet. And I think that's
Yeah.
Jeremiah Love.
Yeah. I think for me, I probably for the Titans am thinking maybe an edge rusher, but I mean, with Jeremiah Love, if you're just talking, not positional value, but just getting the best overall player, it's difficult to imagine a world where Jeremiah Love isn't like a very good to great NFL runner. Like you mentioned, like the breakaway speed. I mean, this dude can rip off explosive plays. He's going to be 21 years old as a rookie too, so like still relatively young. He does have some wear and tear on his body, but he takes care of the football. And I think there's really more to lean into as a receiver. I'm actually really curious just on like what that looks like at the next level too. So ball security, he's a guy that can be on the field for all 3 downs. I think the pass protection is good, maybe not great, but I think that the physicality and the technique in pass pro is pretty good. He like understands where blitz targets are coming from and things of that nature. So I definitely understand, going with Jeremiah Love here. The Giants kind of open up a very interesting proposition. I think this has been a very popular place for a wide receiver in a lot
Yeah.
of these mock drafts because obviously the Giants don't need an edge rusher. They still have Kayvon Thibodeau, but they've invested so much in their pass rush over the past couple of years. I also thought about potentially taking CC Noah here just because Jermaine Illuminor is a free agent. I would anticipate that they're going to try to bring him back, but you could really go a lot of different directions. But I'm going to take Carnell Tate from Ohio State because I think he is going to be the first guy off the board at the receiver position, just because I think that he has the fewest amount of questions. And, going back to Tate's tape, I had watched him so much live just watching Ohio State this year. And I knew that he had come a long way in his development as like a tall, explosive athlete. I think the testing stuff is getting like overblown right now. The 10-yard split is really just what I wanted to confirm. This dude eats up a ton of cushion off the ball. I mean, he's good
Yes.
versus press coverage, can sometimes get a little bit hung up just because he's got a really long, kind of wiry frame. He's not
Yeah.
that big, which maybe like you could talk maybe about like if he's going to reach that kind of tier one of like X receivers. But he played Z, he can play X. He's not going to provide you a ton after the catch, What he is going to provide you is like downfield ball tracking. I mean, this dude won consistently in contested catch situations, outstanding hands, wide catch radius. I think as a route runner this year, that's just where he showed the most growth, man. Like you look at some of those like double moves, like being able to sell vertical, snap guys off at the break point. He just looked like a completely different player this year. And it's really hard to stand out in that way when you're playing across from Jeremiah Smith, but he did it consistently. And I think this is going to be a pretty solid kind of maybe like a 1A type of wide receiver at the next level. But that's worth the top 5 pick probably in this draft where, there's not a lot of blue chip players. You just took Jackson Dart. Darius Slayton is a solid player, but a frustrating one who you're not gonna like. He's just not good enough to where you're gonna pass on a guy like this. So I'm gonna take Cardinal Tate here at 5.
Not to mention Malik Neighbors is coming off an injury too, so it definitely
Right.
raises the
And I
potential.
think that those two stylistically could be really, really fun as long
Yes.
as Neighbors regains that explosiveness that, he was another blue chip caliber prospect coming out a couple years ago. So I think that's a good shout too, is that, you may need some insulation here just with Neighbors coming off the injury.
Yep, 100%. And not just that, like if Neighbors does come back, like he's more of that like yak threat you take out in space, and Carnell Tate's
Yep.
more of like that pure X
Complementary skill
receiver.
sets.
Exactly. That's what you look for. That's what you need when you build a team, when you're building out your team's wide receiver core. You don't want the same exact skill sets. You want guys that can contrast each other really well. So
All
at
right.
number 6, I was a little bit questionable here. Feel like CC Malinoa would have made the most sense in terms of like a secure tackle in the spot, but with how Monroe Freeling has been rising throughout the draft process in terms of just like the potential with him, there's a lot of comparisons to Colton Miller when he was coming out of UCLA, and I could definitely see a lot of that. He's a guy who consistently got better each game, and like his game against Ole Miss in particular was like outstanding. Like he has such a strong like independent hand strike when he actually like relies on that. He has some tendencies to like to lean too far and and in terms of like overextending, but in terms of just like what he provides from a pure like power, just in terms of like athleticism, his foot speed, something that I loved about him was when he
Rare.
gets beat inside, he has that ability to just recover instantly. It happens so many times where Colin Simmons from Texas, really good prospect for potentially next year, by the way,
Hmm.
would beat him inside, and then he would still have the foot speed to be able to mirror and secure that inside lane despite the fact he like overset. So I really like that potential like trump card of athleticism with him. And you're talking about how he just consistently got better. You take like an S tier athlete at offensive tackle and you give him that size, give him give him time to work on what he needs to work on, because the Browns aren't they're not a team that's ready to compete right away. So take the highest upside guy. I'm gonna go with Monroe Freeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the pocket range for Freeling is excellent. I thought his best stuff though was really as a run blocker getting to the second level. Like some of these blocks that he was getting, like ricochet blocks and things like that. There was multiple times where he's literally knocking a 3 technique over like multiple gaps, being able to swivel his hips, get up to the linebacker and seal off a rushing lane for the running back. And then you mentioned just like the athleticism. The radar in space is outstanding. Some of the highlight worthy blocks on screens and things of that nature are pretty wild. So I think the best way that I can like kind of explain his game is that I think that Freeling probably more than any prospect in this draft has like the most, maybe the way like PFF does their grades is like +2, -2. I think that Freeling probably has the most, definitely among the tackles, like +2 and -2 plays. His film is truly like a wild ride. It depends on like what
Yes.
game you even pull up to where like how you're going to view him as a prospect. But he did get better over the course of the year. You're obviously very worried about him being a 1-year starter. That is always a huge thing for me. But I do think that the NFL has proven that in the right ecosystem, these guys can develop. Like offensive linemen and linebackers are positions where we have seen guys develop and get better at the next level. So Freeling would be a perfectly fine bet. It's risky in the top 10, but if you're shooting for the moon in a situation like this, I completely understand going him because I do think that he just has like I think that I trust Freeling's anchor if he can start being more consistent with establishing first contact. I trust Freeling's anchor over Fano, and I just think
Yeah,
that he's just a better athlete than Maui Noah, even if he's not like necessarily a cleaner prospect right now. So,
agreed.
man, where do they have him? Is this right? I feel like this is crazy. I don't.
I thought he was in the 20s last time I checked. Oh, he's in 13.
Oh, 13. I guess I just passed him up. Okay. All right. Washington. Oh boy. Oh boy. What do we say about the Washington defense? Man, what does Washington's edge rusher situation look like? I feel like they have needed pass rushers for so long.
Yeah.
Oh
They
man. Um,
they could go so many different directions too with the pass rushers. Do they want like a longer guy or they want like someone who's more powerful like a Ruben Bain? Like it's definitely like something that's way up in the air in terms of like the type of edge rusher they'd prefer.
yeah, I know. I mean, I feel like Dan Quinn has had some different body types over the years. Um, Oh man, I'm trying to debate. Like to me, I think Bane is a better prospect, and he's in a different tier than a guy like David Bailey. I don't know how
Yeah.
you see these two
No, I see
guys.
it the exact same way.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take Ruben Bain. I also thought about maybe taking Caleb Downs here, but I'm gonna take Ruben Bain just because I think the need is just so evident. Now, I don't think Ruben Bain is actually going to go this high in the draft. It definitely seems like the NFL is higher on David Bailey. It seems like the NFL is lower on Ruben Bain. He is going to be a historical outlier in terms of his arm length. That is well documented. I just don't know that there's that many times on film where I actually thought it was an issue, to be honest with you. And
Yes.
I have a lot of faith that he's going to be able to overcome some of that stuff. Couple of things that I like about Bane. One, this dude is just wired the right way. Like he is an absolute sawed off powder keg off the edge. He plays with a tremendous amount of violence. I also think that his bend at the top of the arc in terms of bending through contact with that lower body surge is just way better than people give him credit for, especially at like 265, 270 pounds. He's been incredibly productive. I mean, there have been some like maybe lulls where he hasn't been dominant, but like you look at the numbers, the pass rush win rate, the pressure rate, the sacks, he's been, a productive player over the past handful of seasons. I do think that he's going to be able to hold up against the run as well. So I think just how skilled he is. And, he does also possess the pass rushing traits that I value, being able to get off the ball, and things of that nature too. I'm going to take Ruben Bain here and feel pretty good about him at least being like a good player, like maybe not an ace pass rusher to where you're going to expect him to get 10 sacks every season or anything like that. But I do think he's going to be a good starter, someone that you can trust in the right situation on all three downs. So that's worth it here for me.
Think about Ruben Bain too. He's been doing this since he was a freshman at Miami. Like he has always been this really powerful player who but also could win off the top of the arc with like speed and bend. And that's
Hmm.
something I think I value a lot more. I'm not really too sure about the consensus view on Ruben Bain, but guys who can win with power and win with speed up the arc, I don't like to overthink those guys, and if they're able to hold the point of attack because they're so dang strong, being able to just like on contact, I don't really care that much about the arm length. I don't think it's going to be an issue for Ruben Bain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that, when you have a guy that's like proven that he can win high side, he can go through people, and he can also like win with inside with pretty skilled hands in the traits that I'm looking for at the position. I understand the arm length. It's just I think that there are so many other things that Bain does extremely well that I just don't think that I mean, there's always a chance when you're talking about a historical outlier that they just bust completely. But this dude plays so hard, man. Like I just can't imagine he's not going to be at least like part of a rotation at the next level. So
Yeah.
yeah, Ruben Bain's going to be the pick for me.
Oh boy, the Saints. So I really, in terms of when I was watching Tyler Shuck, I really thought they struggled with interior pressure, and I
Hmm.
really just think that that's something that they're just going to have to address. And why not just take the best guard in the class in Olaiva Vega Ioane? And yes, I've been practicing
That was
pronouncing
impressive.
that.
I've just been calling him Vega, so that's super
Yeah,
impressive. I would not have been able to do that.
yeah. It's he's a oh my goodness, he's an outstanding player. Like he's got so much power, but he's able to just like hold up at the point of attack on an island a lot of the time. Like you don't see him get a lot of help. He uses his hands really well. He is just powerful. You can move him out in space in a gap scheme specifically too. Like he's one of those guys that will get like so much. But I don't think he's going to look like out of place in an outs in a zone scheme either. He's got really good foot speed for someone that big. He's got like better length than I would expect for a guard his size. Like I think he's one of those guys that genuinely does not struggle with like a lot of longer guys. A popular comparison that Daniel Jeremiah pointed out was Kevin Zeitler in terms of measurables, and
Oh
I
yeah.
just think that's what you're gonna get with Olav Vega. I just think he's going to be very solid, dependable. If there's like we talk a lot about bust proof players and how it's not really true.
Mhm.
Ioane is definitely one of those guys that I think he's going to be like a
Betting on,
really
yeah.
dependable player at the next level. So don't want to overthink it here at 8.
Yeah, I would say too that I just really appreciate like how he approaches the position, like how he forces guys kind of out of what they do best. I think the hands are just like so incredibly powerful, man. You talk about like
Yes.
pop on contact. There's a ton of reps, especially in pass protection, where he's getting his mitts on people, and like you'll see defenders like heads completely like jolt backwards. So the grip strength, the hand placement, the timing in pass pro is very good. And I also just think like some of the stuff with Zeitler too is like, he just anchors pretty efficiently. I think against power. So I really trust him as somebody that's going to be able to, keep the dish really clean for a quarterback. And for the Saints, you got a young quarterback that you think you might have stole last year in Tyler Shook. I think adding him some protection would definitely be a good thing for them. And you mentioned the gap scheme stuff too. Like I completely agree. Like the ability to like reset the line of scrimmage is definitely evident. I don't think he's a guy that you're gonna expect to like get out in space and make kind of maybe some of the highlight blocks that we're talking about with some of the other top prospects in recent years. But I think he's more of like a functional athlete, and he definitely clears the threshold
Yeah.
there in my opinion. So, oh man, the Chiefs. Just I will say this: I did like what the Chiefs did. I thought that they got good value for Trent McDuffie
Oh
yesterday
yeah.
to trade for the Rams.
And
Being able to get a first round pick and then some, I understand it from both sides. The Rams really desperately needed a corner. The Chiefs have proven that they can kind of cycle through guys in spag schemes, so I do understand that.
yeah.
Um, Man, I think that we could go a couple different directions here. I I'm not sure if like people I'm not sure if this has been a popular thing, but I am gonna take Caleb Downs. Downs right now is number 4 on my big board, I believe. I need to double check that. But um Downs is an awesome player, man. Like you talk about just like scheme flexibility. I think that he is one of the most instinctual players at the position that I've scouted in a handful of years. I mean, he's right on the like Brian Branch level prospect for me, just behind like how I viewed Kyle Hamilton coming out when he was, I think that was 2022. But Downs is an outstanding tackler. The technique, the striking ability. I think he's got more playmaking chops than maybe his numbers would indicate over the past handful of years. But I'll never forget, like one of the plays I'll always come back to with Downs is he was playing as like the pole runner at Alabama, and they were trying to run Brock Bowers up the seam when they were playing Georgia when he was like a freshman. This kid's like
Yeah.
18 years old, and he's sitting there like matching it, going up and batting the ball away at the high point. So I think there's just a ton that you can do with him. Downs is another one of those players, never in the wrong spot, man. Like block deconstruction, the way that he plays the ball in the flats, eliminating yards after the catch. I don't think he's an elite athlete, to be honest with you. But I think that the instincts are just so overwhelmingly great that it honestly helps him play faster and mask some of the maybe lack of explosiveness that some of these other guys in this class have. He's just a phenomenal player, man. And I think he's relatively safe. And I think that one of the things about Spag's scheme, he loves these like chess piece guys that can play multiple different roles. I think back to like how good that addition was with Justin Reed a handful of years ago, and I want to slide Downs like right into that, like what he can do for you around the line of scrimmage. He
Oh
also has
yeah.
enough, like, he can obviously play in the post as well. So I think Downs is a really well-rounded player that I'm excited. I want him to go to a good team. Is kind of another reason that I'm putting him with the Chiefs. I expect they'll bounce back with Mahomes once he gets healthy. So I want him on a good team.
Yeah, if you're talking just like one of the like best players on tape in general, and we were talking about this with Ruben Bain, like he's been doing this since he was a freshman in Nick Saban's scheme, by the way. Which,
Yeah.
if you're a freshman starting in Nick Saban's scheme and you're just relied on to be that type of player, you're that guy.
Yeah.
Odds are you're going to be a pretty good player.
And he also played under Matt Patricia, which is another, like, Ohio State literally was running an NFL defense last year.
Yeah.
Like if you look at it like that, it looks like an NFL defense from a game planning preparation standpoint. These guys were incredibly well coached. So I just think that all three of the top guys for Ohio State, really easy translations to the league.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I,
Got
so
the
10.
Bengals.
Yeah, this is a bit of a tough one because with Caleb Downs gone, this is going to be an interesting direction. In terms of the defensive line consensus group, I don't know how I know how some people view this right now with like Caleb Banks and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I'm still really high on Peter Woods, and I think a player like
Ooh,
that just makes so much sense for the Bengals. They
okay.
haven't had like that wrecking version of Geno Atkins in so long, and Peter Woods, you talk about like his length is not like that great, but he is such a powerful player on contact. Like something I was so impressed with him in like years past was how he could two gap on some of these wide zone runs where he's genuinely holding one offensive lineman with the one arm and then he's got the other one with the other and he's still like maintaining gap integrity, not getting pushed off his spot. He's just so strong, both upper body, lower body, wins with power, wins with bend, speed. Like he's just that type of high upside player that I really think the Bengals need. So I'm just not gonna overthink it. I'll go with Peter Woods here.
Yeah, I think with Woods, it's not just the ability to get off the ball and get into guys' frames or like lockout, peak, shed. The shedding part of it with Woods is like evident on his film. Like it's not
Yeah.
always just about like how violent you are to try to establish that first contact. It's also like how violent you are getting off the block. And Woods has the athleticism to also like make plays away from his gap. I think there are some questions about just like how actually refined he is as a rusher. I think that some of the stuff, the lack of production, maybe for a guy that's been this highly built and talented, can be explained by his usage over the years has been kind of strange. Like he was played
Yes.
a lot in the note, like a nose tackle role this year, like over the A gap, 0-1 technique. I'm just like I want him more as like a 3, I think, at the next level. And I think that's how NFL teams will view him. But for the Bengals too, they need pass rushing help bad. I mean, it
Yes.
was they did get some good contributions from Miles Murphy down the stretch last year, but once Trey Hendrickson went down, man, like, and even when he was in the game, I mean, they were consistently like bottom of the league in time to pressure rate, all those things that matter. I mean, I think they've got some other pieces maybe defensively. They're going to need some bodies up front along the defensive line because I think they probably drafted the 2 worst linebackers I've seen taken in the in the draft the past couple of years in Demetrius
Made
Knight
no sense at the
and
time.
Carter. Yeah, those guys, they can't play. Honestly, I hate to, no disrespect, but they're gonna have to get some beef up on the defensive line. So this would be early for me personally for Woods, but I do definitely understand like the direction that you're taking. All right, let's go to the Dolphins. Man, David Bailey. We still haven't taken David Bailey. This is probably more of the range that I view David Bailey rather than how
Yeah.
the NFL will probably view him. But the Dolphins, they took Chop Robinson. I actually think there's probably too much similarities between Bailey and Robinson for those games. I look at the Dolphins over the past handful of years, they desperately need cornerback help, man. So to me, the top cornerback from a talent perspective is Jermon McCoy from Tennessee. I just this dude, man, like his tape Like he literally came onto the college football scene as an 18-year-old and played exceptionally well. Even last year, 2024 or 2 years ago now, as a 19-year-old, there are just so many like high level flashes. Jeremiah Smith kind of got the better of him a little bit in their matchup, but you talk about a guy that can play press, can play off. I think the zone coverage instincts are good. He can really run. Probably not as consistent as he needs to be in terms of locating the ball at the high point, but there are flashes of him making some plays on the football. So there's the obvious question mark here that we got to see McCoy get back on the field at his pro day. I would like to see testing. I have to see him work out though. Like he's got to get back on the field. If he doesn't work out, like I just don't know how you would feel comfortable taking him in the first round. It's just a bet that you probably couldn't make, considering I
Yeah.
was told that he was, healthy enough to come back and play in the fall. It was just that Tennessee was kind of out of the picture. So raised a lot of eyebrows for me personally about why he didn't at least work out in Indy. But I do think that McCoy has a little bit of a higher ceiling. I like Mansour Lane a lot as a player coming out of LSU. Worry a little bit about the long speed, but I definitely think he's a player that, those two guys in this position specifically would be where I would go. I understand that maybe getting a receiver to complement Jalen Waddle would be intriguing, but this cornerback thing, man, enough is enough. Like, you
Yeah.
got to get this figured out if you're Miami.
Yeah, no, for sure. That was definitely the direction I was looking at for Miami in terms of the two corners. Like Delane, you talked about the long speed questions, but
Mm-hmm.
McCoy, like there's that huge upside, and you talk about the fact too that Miami's a team that's on the transition. Like they are, overturning a lot of players from the previous regime, and they're going to be a team that is more like more towards the bottom. So take the upside swing while you can. I is what I think you do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of Dallas here, I I'm really not as high on David Bailey as most, but
Mm-hmm.
it does make sense here. I totally get it, but I just want to stick with the highest player on my board at this point, and that is CJ Allen out of Georgia. And I really think they
Ooh,
need off-ball linebacker help.
they
I
do.
they do not have like that type of player that can like genuinely like communicate on their defense. It felt like they lacked a lot of leadership. Like there's a lot of like potential like players like Quinnen Williams and stuff that are on that defensive line, but they don't have like someone that can direct through traffic. And you see with CJ Allen, he has that ability to be able to go in coverage, but he also has that range. He's like in the right spot a lot of the time. Coverage wise, there's like a lot of like athletic ability, but there's sometimes like, lapses on his tape where he's not always in the right spot, but you see him communicating constantly, like trying to pass guys off, knowing his responsibility in zone. He's very accountable. And that's something that Dallas needs is accountability on that defense. So give me CJ Allen.
Go. Oh boy, I didn't think he was gonna come off the board that early, but I do like I like CJ. I like CJ Allen for sure. Like I said, this is an outstanding linebacker class overall. So I definitely understand what you're saying. I mean, if you watch Dallas's defense, I mean, they're picking guys up off the scrap heap. I mean, didn't
Yeah.
they traded for the guy from the Bengals, what's his name? Logan Wilson. And he's like
Yes.
he's been cooked for multiple years now. Like that's how desperate they've been. So I definitely understand that. All right, so who we got here? Rams. So they traded for Trent McDuffie. I would be open to pairing McDuffie with Mansour Delane here, and this is probably the range that I think is appropriate for him. Um, but at the same time, the Rams just have not prioritized that position. I mean, they've traded for some star guys, but they haven't drafted one very highly. I think that Kobe Durant, if I remember correctly, is a free agent. I'm not going to
Yeah.
bother to look, but
I f-
I'm gonna take CC Malinois here.
yeah.
This one, I mean, their right tackle retired this off season. One of the things about Matthew Stafford is, he is a guy that is willing to push the ball down the field, but he does require a lot of protection at this stage of his career. He's going to get the ball rid of the ball quick, and he's going to test some really tight windows with that arm. But his, like everybody, like his production and effectiveness really drops when you're, not able to, give him a pretty clean pocket. So, Malinois, I think this dude is one of the strongest players in the class, I would say.
Yes.
Like the anchor is, I mean, it's almost like he's almost like an impenetrable fortress and pass pro, and he does move people in the run game too. So I
Yes.
think that Maui Noah, I, he's probably got the capacity to be a very good guard and a solid to good tackle. So I think you probably let him fail outside and then kick inside afterwards. But a lot of the things that I heard in Indy too, like really high character marks about Maui Noah. So probably goes off the board earlier than this, but this would be a great. I feel like this would be a great fall for the Rams if they were able to, snag him at this point in the draft.
Yeah, I was gonna say like Noah falling this fall is falling this far is like really like that's a really good luck for the Rams in this spot because
Hmm.
I normally I'd think of like an offensive tackle in this situation like maybe like Blake Miller as high as in this spot.
Hmm.
Um but the fact Noah fell, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You talk about like his pass protection. He relies a lot on that outside hand strike. He's almost it kind of reminds me of Fuaga when he was at Oregon State in terms
Yeah.
of like the power and just like how he like independently strikes with his outside hand. So it sometimes leaves his like outside like vulnerable, but you can just tell he's like
Yeah.
really like
It
he
is.
has that hand
It
strike.
is really interesting watching the top tackles this year, just like how guys are coached and comfortable. Is Maui Noah is like almost, maybe a little bit susceptible. So there's some two-hand punching in there as well, but relying a
Yeah.
little bit too much on his outside hand. And then you watch a guy like Fano, who is literally, I mean, he uses the flashbait technique every single rep. I mean,
Yes.
it's almost funny because it's like, if you got the scouting report, you kind of know what this guy's going to do. And he still like gets people to almost like fall on their face with that. But yeah, I mean, I think Manoa here, especially with the gap scheme stuff that McVay's been doing, a lot of duo, a lot of under center stuff, he's going to move people off the ball for you, man. So like whether that's
Yeah.
at right tackle or guard or whatever, I think it's a pretty good pick. So all right, we got Baltimore.
I'm leaning towards Makai Lemon here in terms of just giving Lamar like
Ooh.
that just absolutely dependable target over the middle that won't drop it in traffic. Because we've seen in the past with guys like Mark Andrews too, like they don't hang on, like when they get those passes in like those tight zone windows. So like Lemon to
Hmm.
me, we don't know. I don't. I just want to say this. I'm not very privy to all of like what is going on with in terms of like potentially the interview questions there. I just know
Hmm.
what I've seen on the field. This is a high effort player. He gives it all. Like he will
As a
block
blocker.
guys. Yes, exactly. He's not a big dude. Like
Yeah,
like
he's
he's
small.
not. Yeah, he's a lot smaller, but he plays with such like strong demeanor, and you really like respect that about his game. But like he also has great ways of just getting open. Like he understands deception with his routes, just being able to settle within zones. Like he's just extremely dependable. And you know what Baltimore needs? Dependability. Zay Flowers, really good player, but sometimes he isn't always like on the field, and sometimes he's not, he has those drops, but he's more relied on the outside. Get a guy inside like a Makai Lemon, where Lamar, excels. He excels in the middle of the field. That's one of his like absolute best traits. So I really think Makai Lemon, his fall stops here.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, I know some Ravens fans are gonna complain probably about like if that is the pick that they just have this obsession with like smaller receivers. With Bateman's not the biggest guy, Zay Flowers smaller guy, but Lemon plays big, not just like as an effort blocker, but also at the catch point. Like
Yes.
hands technique, high pointing the football, playing bigger than his size. Like you look at the contested catch percentages over the past couple of years. I mean, it's just like proven ability. I actually have mentioned this a couple times, but I actually thought his 2024 tape was better than last year, even though the numbers are nearly identical.
Yeah.
Super productive though. I mean, he's been like a 3 yards per route run guy. I mean, it's all there. I don't think he's. I understand why a guy like him wouldn't test because I just don't think like how much higher can he realistically go with his frame. But I think he's a really good player and somebody that's deserving to go, in this part of the first round. So this next pick is really easy, to be honest with you. I'm gonna do this one for the Bucks fans and Trevor Sikkema, friend of the show. I'm gonna give them David Bailey. David Bailey to me is an imperfect prospect, but if you're just looking at like what if you focus on like what he can do for you, the burst off the ball is truly like exceptional. I mean, there are
Yes.
there are some of his sacks from the past couple years are literally like under 2.5 seconds. So if you're just wanting like a lightning rod off the edge, first step explosiveness out of this world. Second, third step up the arc, same thing. This dude will try to run through people's chest. He's primarily like a high side rusher, but he does have enough kind of lateral agility or side to side quicks to like for inside counters. He actually got, speaking of Spencer Fano, he got Fano on an inside spin move. The inside spin move isn't like a consistent winner for him, but he does like flash it. I think he can get there with it because
Yeah.
he does know how to set it up. And that's the thing about the NFL tackles is like they're there are better athletes at the next level. Those guys are still not going to be nearly as explosive from a range perspective to consistently get out there in front of David Bailey. Like you're not going to run by your guys for 10 sacks in the league, but what it will do is like it will open those guys' shoulders, their hips to the sideline, and he'll be able to capitalize off of that with some powered rushes too. I do just think as a run defender, I worry about him more than I do Ruben Bain, despite like the length discrepancy there in their profiles.
Yes.
I think that you can really get after Bailey on the downhill run game, especially like double teams. I saw him get wiped out a handful of times against tight ends as well. So that's just something you may have to live with. But the pass rushing upside, again, like he has a ton of potential there. So I think that that's the Bucks have needed. Like I know they're in the Max Crosby sweepstakes, maybe they're in the Trey Hendrickson sweepstakes as well. But to go with Yaya Diaby, like you talk about Kalashi Kansey up there, they're going to have a bunch of juice off the ball, and hopefully that'll be kind of the missing ingredient for what Todd Bowles is needed over there.
Yeah. No, they definitely need help along
Not
the
as
edge.
bendy. I do have an issue with people calling him like a bendy rusher. I've seen some
Yeah.
comps to bendy guys. I know the Brian Burns was the like that flashed across the screen on NFL Network a handful of
Yeah.
times. Like,
No.
no, Bailey has better speed to power than Burns did coming out. And I love Burns as a prospect. He's like one of my favorite rushers I've ever scouted. But
Yeah.
he does he's a little bit tight in his ankles, but super explosive though.
Yeah, you talk about the speed to power, the explosiveness. I really think that's going to be what his trump card needs to be at the NFL level. So, I mean, and we talk about like the 15 area for David Bailey. That makes a lot more
Hmm.
sense than like this top 10 range that,
Yeah.
people are talking about for him. The Jets in this situation, uh, I feel that they really need help with their cornerback situation, and I'm split between two players, between Avion Terrell and Mansour Delane. I really
Hmm.
value athleticism at the position, and Terrell, to me, he plays the run pretty effectively, despite the fact like I've seen questions there. A lot of Clemson corners seem to get that question, but I see them like come up and fit just enough to where
Hmm.
I don't have that like specific question. So for me, I'm going with Terrell. I really value his athleticism. He is just an uber like flexible player. Like you see with his hips, the way he's able to turn and mirror, his feet are extremely smooth. Some of those drills at the combine too, like you could just see were just like they were like teach tape in terms of what he provides in terms of like his ability and off coverage. But he's also a guy who can, be really instinctual in zone coverage as well. I really think to me that Terrell is that type of player that fits what the Jets are doing both short term and long term. So for me, give me that type of like upside, but also like that dependability.
Oh yeah, I mean Terrell, one of those guys that can like legitimately play from a pedal, really light feet. I think that he will come up and hit people. I think that there are some limitations that come with his size. I mean, he's not like a bigger dude, but he did come in like heavier and longer than I anticipated. To be honest,
Yeah.
like that was one of the bigger surprises for me from a measurable standpoint. I think with Terrell, what you're kind of hoping to get to is a guy that can play like inside outside for you, depending on the week. Like if he does reach his potential, somebody that you can move around the defense. Aaron Glenn, he's going to be there at least for the next 8 weeks. Through the first 8 weeks of the season. So they're going to play a ton of man coverage. Terrell can definitely do that for you. I think, honestly, I am with you in terms of I don't think that the run defense was anything concerning. He will come down into the
Yeah.
flat and hit, like take on blocks. There's limitations there for sure. But from an effort perspective, it's all there. He's an extremely good playmaker, man. Like some of these
Yes.
plays that he's making, like ripping the ball out, the peanut punches, like I do think he's going to force turnovers the next level. I just think it's natural for him. But the thing with the length, to me, I was surprised that he came in as long as he did, just because I did think that guys were able to, at times, when they were able to cross his face on like end breakers and things like that, he wasn't able to quite get back into position. It
Yeah.
was easily kind of boxed out. He wasn't able to kind of reach over and through at the catch point. But Terrell's a really good player. For Clemson, it was a disastrous season for them last year, but I thought that he was still playing with a lot of effort, and I don't think that that was the case with a lot of their guys. So no shade, but that's just what the film says. So the Lions.
I wonder if we're thinking the same thing here for Detroit.
Oh man. Um, I am thinking a couple different directions. I would be interested in Delane, but I think I'm gonna go Spencer Fano here.
Yep. I was thinking
Um,
the same exact thing.
I think that one of the biggest reasons for the decline in Detroit last year was just an overall decline in their offensive line play. So
Yes.
I'm gonna take Fano. Fano was like one of my guys coming out of summer scouting. And honestly, like his tape is really clean. Like I said, I think the biggest potential red flag with Fano is just that I don't know if his anchor is average at best, and there is a potential that it's not good enough at the next level to where when guys are able to get like a real runway on him and establish first contact, I think they just might he might consistently end up in the lap of the quarterback. Having said that, though, I think the run blocking tape, especially from 2024, was really, really solid. And he's an awesome athlete. I mentioned like the flash bait technique. He is a really, really skilled pass protector. Like the
Yes.
recovery athleticism is there. So he definitely knows how to play the position. It's just that offense is also a really difficult translation to the league because there is a lot of NFL stuff in there with like multiple tight ends and it's a downhill run scheme. There's just not a lot of true island pass sets. And I think
Yeah.
that Fano's skill set shows that he can do well there. It's just the volume of those snaps at the next level is going to be greater, and he's going to be going up against a lot stronger guys. So he's going to have to make sure that he wins the first contact engagement a little more consistently. That patient play style works, especially given the opponent. But there are some guys that may just look at him and not think he has the sand in his pants. I will say though, he has consistently put on weight. He just needs to get stronger in his lower half, in my opinion. But he has gained weight 2 years consistently. He came in over 300 pounds, which I was like, whew, thank God. I thought there was a chance he was going to come in lighter than that. But yeah, I'm going to take Fano, whether it's at tackle, whether it's at guard. Probably in this case, I mean, is Taylor Decker, have they said, like, is he coming back? I think
I
he's
have
coming back, right?
I have not seen in
I
that.
know they released Glasgow. They've had some struggles along the interior in general. I was interested that they had him work out at center at the combine.
Yes.
So I would be very interested in a transition to center for Fano, especially because guys like this that are exceptional athletes and I think can be real weapons in the run game. I know it's difficult, to get the calls and the protections, and making a swap like that for your first round pick is a risk. But I
Yeah.
think guard center, he could probably play multiple different positions, and Detroit kind of needs this influx of talent.
Yeah, no, fully agreed on that. And like you said, like with previous guys, like you could either let him fail a tackle or you could try him
Yeah.
fully at center. And we talked about how he moved. I mean, I watched him in the wave drill at the combine, and it was like he was on a different planet
Oh
compared
yeah.
to the other players.
So smooth. So smooth.
Yes, absolutely. So I totally get that. Now, 18 for the Vikings. I really just want to pick like a dependable player. And honestly, he was the highlight of the combine. I thought he put out some of the best like drills, like they were almost teach tape, was Dylan Thieneman from
Hmm.
Oregon. He is a guy who's so smooth in his pedal, covers so much ground. He can flip his hips like just effortlessly. You watch him track the ball in the air. I mean, he's got some of the best ball skills in this entire class. You watch him from single high and like how controlled, but also how like fast he can get from literal center field all the way outside the numbers, outside the hashes. Like he's just so impressive in terms of his range, but he will fit the run from depth. Like you watch him like come up like in terms of like his range, his ability to tackle, like he brings his hips, like he wraps up. I really think like the Vikings need that type of dependability at, you know, at safety with Harrison Smith retiring. And while there's going to be popular comparisons to him, he is a much different type of athlete in terms of the
Hmm.
full testing numbers. Like he's more in like the stratosphere of guys like Eric Berry in terms of like how they tested. But
Hmm.
you know, you talk about dependability, like what Thiemann, you know, brought to Oregon and also Purdue before that, ball skills. He brought the ability to just have so much range over the top. I really think this is the type of player you just take at the spot. Like you again, this is that draft where you're gonna take players that are going to be at positions that aren't super highly valued, but you want to take the best player. You don't want to reach on guys that you don't feel comfortable with in the spot. So for me, just not gonna overthink it. Dylan Thiemann at 18.
Yeah, I think communication skills really stand out. Completely different role in Oregon's defense this year. You got to see him play more single high with Purdue, but the
Yes.
range, like legit post to sideline range, like this dude can really, really roll. I don't know if he's as loose in the hips as like maybe some of the top end comparisons that I've seen just since the combine. But I
Yeah.
did think he looked pretty good in the drills though. So I just don't know if that always like showed up on tape. But I will say this, like extremely reliable player, excellent tackler. You look at the missed tackle rates throughout the course of his, his stints. That I mean, this dude's like technique and form is really good. I also think that Thieneman does a really good job like working through the trash. So
Yes.
guys that are like climbing linemen that are getting to the second level, like he has a good way of like evading them. The Harrison Smith thing is kind of funny. I think a lot of it's just because he's white, but and that he's a really good player. But I would also say that Thieneman is a guy that can play in this NFL world where you're wanting your safeties to be able to rock and roll and play a bunch of different alignments. I think he can do everything at a solid or better level for the most part. As a tackler is just the impact on contact is just different than Harrison Smith. Like Harrison Smith has made a career, I feel like, of decleating guys, and
Yes.
Thieneman is a really fundamentally sound tackler. He doesn't miss tackles, but he does give up like a yard or two after contact just because he's not like got outstanding pop. So, but this is a good player, man. Like we've seen it over the past 2 years, so I definitely understand where you're coming from here, taking Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon. So, all right, the Panthers. I've seen some receiver mocks in this spot. Man, they've taken receiver, like so many receivers early, and they've got Jalen Coker. That's a little bit for me. This was a CJ Allen spot, but you've already taken him. Do we want to go? Thinking maybe Caleb Banks here. I have no idea how the league is going to view Caleb Banks. Like,
Yeah.
what
Same.
what is your opinion of Caleb Banks? I thought I liked him a decent amount over the summer. Obviously, he only played the one game last year. Looked pretty solid, but it his when I watched him over the summer, it was a lot of inconsistencies game to game. He was a guy that actually played it. He transferred from Louisville, so relatively familiar for him. But what's your take on Banks?
I just think he's one of those guys who plays really tall, and like that's going to be a problem at the next
Yeah, the
level. He
pad
kind
level
of
is a huge concern for me.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit like of a guy before him, Gravon Dexter, in terms of like just
Mhm.
how tall he plays in his pads.
Yeah.
He's a little bit top heavy too. Like I definitely see the like potential like theoretical upside with him, but I think he might be more of an idea as opposed to like a full like player in terms of what I would take at this spot. But I
Mhm.
definitely get the idea of like what Caleb Banks could be.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the hands were pretty skilled just in terms of like having a pass rush plan. It's just kind of weird that I felt like I think I watched like 4 games over the summer, and there were moments where I felt like he was the most dominant player on the field, and then there were a lot of moments where it almost looked like he shouldn't be on the field. You mentioned some of the stuff, like he would just get sideswiped consistently, like, and because he plays so high, like he's an easy guy that to like end up on the ground. So him being 6'6", I know a lot of people like look at the RAS stuff and they're like, oh, he's like 6'6", and this is the testing, and it looks like great on the sheet. But being 6'6" like has drawbacks as a defensive tackle. Like you would
Yes.
rather them be like super long, but like almost squatty because it just gives them that natural leverage. And guys could get like underneath his pads. I do think as a pass rusher, I think that just from a play strength perspective and the fact that his hands are skilled, I do prefer him over Peter Woods in that regard.
Mm.
Um, so I just wish we could have seen a little bit more last year, but dealing
Yeah.
with the foot injury. But I think this is probably the range of outcomes for Banks, probably the early part of it. I'm trying to look at some of the other teams that may need defensive line help. I was thinking about maybe the Jets because they traded away Quinnen Williams. But Banks
I
has a
was gonna
lot of
say,
upside. There is some risk, I feel like,
yeah.
with a guy like his profile, though, just because pad level, block recognition, it needs some work, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe the early part of the draft would be like a 10 to the Bengals where I took Peter Woods.
That is true. You never know what the Bengals are gonna do. But I don't know. Banks is almost like too talented of a player. I feel like the Bengals usually just take like whatever the most raw athlete is that they can
Mm,
get their hands on and try to go
yeah,
with that. But
I got you.
all right, 20, Dallas.
This one is a tough one. I'm like split between multiple edge defenders. I mean, they really
Hmm.
need help at the along the edge in terms of pass rush. That's what happens when you trade away your best pass rusher, go figure. In terms of just like, potential like outside rush, I could see a guy like Cassius Howell at this spot, but that like almost borderline outlier wingspan, arm length just absolutely terrifies me.
Hmm.
Akeem Mesidor is like he's a really good player, but we don't know
Senior
about
citizen.
yep, we don't know about the medicals either too, and he's older. Keldrick Falk is one of the most interesting players I've watched in terms of like he's got like almost zero explosiveness, but he's one of the smoothest guys that you watch. It's really weird with him, but I think I'm gonna go into a direction. I'm gonna stick with the theme. We're just gonna call it the theme of my drafts. I'm gonna go with TJ Parker out of Clemson because for me,
Oh,
I
okay.
see. Yeah, I feel like this is a guy that like a lot of people had super high expectations for, and some of those expectations maybe crushed a little bit of like where how people view him right now.
Hmm.
And trust me, the in terms of like the effort on Clemson's defense, it wasn't great with a lot of these guys, and I totally 100% get it. But Parker to me, he brings enough athleticism. Like I definitely think he's bursty, but I also think in terms of speed to power, he's got that potential. You see how lengthy he is. Like he's able to control guys with his length, but he has that like outside like bend, be able to threaten the outside edge. And a lot of times when you see those types of guys, he's got like some really good reps where like he'll like hit you with like a side scissors or like he'll hit you with like a really nice cross chop. Like the game against South Carolina was his last game of his college career, and he absolutely destroyed that poor South Carolina right tackle. It wasn't even like funny in terms of what he was doing to him. Parker might be more of an idea, but I feel like I could see that idea coming more into fruition in terms of like what he could be. So for me, I mean, Dallas needs edge rusher help, and I think Parker to me brings like that biggest mix of like potential like outside rush, but also giving me that speed to power potentially too as a run defender.
Yeah, Parker was a really difficult one for me to get on board with over the summer. So I'm significantly lower on him than consensus. I
Yeah.
do agree with some of what you're saying though, in terms of being a technician with his hands. Like he does have, he's one of those guys that I think like has a semblance of a plan. Like he does have a pass rushing plan. I just don't know if he has. I don't know that I see an NFL like caliber athlete on film, which is kind of weird because like he was like a huge recruit. I'm pretty sure coming out.
Yeah.
I just don't know if he has like the juice, man. To be honest, I think some of the stuff is just too slow. But he is really long and he's got some size. I do think that like also some of these guys have questions about are they going to be able to hold up on all three downs or like play early down situation, neutral downs. I think Parker can do that for you. I just think his process needs to be sped up at the next level. Like you mentioned, the cross chop. I watched the Louisville game a couple weeks ago or a week ago or so when I was in Indy. Like he had a couple really nice wins on that tape against their right tackle, but I don't know. I think he's more of like a developmental player that I would take on day two. But I do agree with what you're saying with Dallas. Like they need another pass rusher. I think that getting Ezaraku last year was a nice start, but some of the
Yes.
guys they were rolling out there opposite him just tough. And like he is bigger, longer, whereas Araku is, kind of he is a little bit of a wiry guy. So maybe a good like complementary skill set situation, even if, probably some other guys I might prefer more. This leaves us to this is the time right here. This is showtime, prime time.
Yes.
Steelers at 21. I feel like the board, not that we were intentionally doing this, set up extremely well for the Steelers. So this leads to a couple different avenues for me personally. Starting with Jordan Tyson and Mansour Delane. Which of these prospects do you think is higher on, in your opinion, right now? Assuming you've had a chance to like study both of them.
I've studied Tyson and Delane,
Hmm.
but Tyson in terms of like like his pure like film, I genuinely thought like in terms of like athleticism and like what he could do like from an upside perspective, I think in terms of like what he could be as a wide receiver versus what Mansour Delane could be as a corner, Tyson definitely ranks higher for me, but Delane is definitely the more sure thing in terms of like, being a solid player. Cause like, again, we don't know too much about Tyson's medicals, and that's a big question.
Yeah. I will say this. I've asked around. I was having a lot of trouble getting answers on like how Tyson's medicals looked in Indy.
Mhm.
It did. I haven't heard anything bad, so that is good. I think that things came back relatively clean. I understand that there's some hesitation there about like the fact that he didn't work out, and it's been a long time since he had the soft tissue injury stuff. We'll see if he does anything at the pro day. I really like Jordan Tyson as a player. He was a guy that I loved over the summer. I'm just gonna stick with that kind of evaluation. I think the quickness at the line of scrimmage is outstanding. This dude is really, really twitched up, man. Like, and there's just proven film back to back seasons now of him being able to get his own buckets in isolation. He moves like the top wide receivers move. And I actually had someone message me and was like, "Hey, like I've heard you say this a couple times with Tyson. Like, what do you mean?" There's one specific play where he catches a like kind of a circus route or a bench route in the end zone where he kind of like hangs in the air and almost like does the Mario like double jump
Yeah.
in the end zone at the pylon. If you watch his body before the break point, like he is literally heading into the break point with his like shoulders and everything pointed forwards and his hips are moving out. And the safety that is trying to cover him in a half field look is literally just stuck in quicksand because his ability to create separation is outstanding. And the Steelers really need somebody that can beat man to man, dude. Like
Yeah.
this dude, too, like Mike McCarthy, really likes players that can like move around the formation, can play on the ball, off the ball, in the slot. I think the intermediate stuff is really where like he does the best work. Like I said, the break point, the rocker steps, stair step techniques, like he has it all. I think he's pretty good against zone coverage too. I think the big thing with Tyson is just he does have like some there's I would say he's a good but not great route runner. And I think that
Yes.
he has the potential to be a great one. There are some times where like he'll like kind of put his landing gears out a little bit and give some indicators before the break point. He needs to get more proactive with his hands, keeping guys off his frame. I was happy that he came in at like the weight that he did. So that's good too. Also, sometimes where like he could probably push vertical a little bit more. He talked about this at the combine that like he needs to, play more consistently, from an effort perspective on snap basis. And I know like, that probably maybe might turn some listeners off that are like, well, like, why do I want to take a guy in the first round that doesn't go 100%? That's not all that uncommon in college if they don't know, if they don't think they're getting the ball. And honestly, he played I think he played with one of the most overrated quarterbacks in college football the past 2 years too, with Sam Levitt, because that dude like
Yeah.
refuses to play on time in front of the pocket. I think he's just a better fit for like where the NFL is. It's a rhythm and timing league, and I think that Tyson, his ability to separate is going to be better. It's just the injuries, man. Like collarbone, ACL, soft tissue injury last year. Like, is this dude going to be healthy, or are you getting sold yourself a damaged bag of goods? But I'm going to take Tyson here. I would understand if the Steelers went Delane, and I would be pretty happy with that. I'm sure we'll probably take him relatively soon, and we could talk about kind of his skill set. But I want to take Jordan Tyson, even if it is the predictable one that I mocked to the Steelers in my mock draft 1.0 over a month ago.
Yeah, I was definitely a lot of connections there with Hines Ward as his receivers coach for sure. Man, the Chargers at 22. I don't know if the value or in terms of like potential fit of defensive linemen is working out here for what I would do. So I'm in a really weird position where I just want to take the best available player. And I'm not so sure that Aronde Gadsden is like he's like one of those like long-term building pieces. And maybe I'm higher on Kenyon Sadiq as a blocker, but I feel like that's the type of guy if they draft, they won't have to like worry about in those types of situations. And giving Justin Herbert another weapon really can't hurt, especially after the last regime. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Kenyon Sadiq. I think this might be a very unpopular pick, but is at 22. He's one of my highest graded players. I think he's someone who just brings a special level of athleticism and yak traits to the table. He's just one of those guys who's incredibly strong. He's really hard to like knock off his spot in terms of like his ability as a blocker. Like I don't necessarily believe that like he's the biggest, but there's something different about his frame. I've kind of pointed this out. This dude is chiseled. Like he's got insane muscle density like on like his arms, but also like his upper legs. I genuinely think this dude has like one of the most unique builds in terms of just like how much like potential power he's got. One of the biggest questions I maybe have about his game, I in combat catch situations, there are instances where he makes some outstanding catches, but there are some like moments of like technical stuff I see with him where his hands are just way too wide, like almost comically wide, and he will just end up clapping on the ball and ends up leading into a drop, and I don't necessarily think like that is like something that's been discussed about enough with Sadiq. I think a lot of people try to focus on his blocking, but I don't think the blocking is necessarily the problem. I think he's a little bit more raw as a receiver than people would like to believe. He's a good seam stretcher. He can do like a lot in terms, like he showed more in terms of being able to like route guys off, but a lot of it was like down the stretch. We didn't really see a lot of that. It was a lot of design plays, a lot of seam shots where, 50-50 balls. So for me, Sadiq, I think he is one of the highest upside players in this class. And to me, like the Chargers could always use another weapon. So give me Kenyon Sadiq at 22.
If you didn't take him there, I was taking him for Philly. Just
Yeah.
because I know there's some stuff out there about like maybe Dallas Goedert's kind of potentially moving on.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like I could go a couple different spots here. I think I'm gonna go with Mansour Delane.
Yeah.
The cornerback spot opposite Quinion Mitchell has been an issue. So I'm trying to think about like the scheme stuff. It would be different than what he was asked to do at LSU, which was more like him playing at the line of scrimmage. There's a lot to like with Delane though. Just the smoothness, his change of direction ability. I mean, his tape was literally dominant. I mean, the only receiver that I really felt like gave him even some issues was kind of Casey Concepcion. I don't think he's like got like a third gear that's overly impressive, to be honest with you. I think that that's maybe the one concern. But if you're talking about a guy that can play off the line of scrimmage, I think he's really good in zone, spatial awareness, jumping routes, things like that. I think he's a pretty solid, reliable run defender as well. I just think the feet are super, super light, man. Like my favorite thing about him, and it shows up a lot, and if you pull up his press rep cut ups, is like just the patience at the line of scrimmage. I mean, this dude's like he's unfathomably like disciplined at the line of scrimmage, like head fakes, jab steps. Like there's some like double moves that people try to stop on him, where he's just like staying on top of the route the entire time. I think he had an end zone interception. I think it was, or I don't know if it was an interception, but there was one rep against Clemson where it was like one of those TikTok release routes where it took like the guy 15 seconds to get off the line of scrimmage, and he was just like, "This is too easy for me." But if you go look at like, especially the tape from early in the season, it was just awesome. I don't know if he's like I think he's a solid athlete, but that's probably like the extent of that. And I understand this is like a stopwatch position, but he's super smart, really disciplined. I think that you can do probably everything you want to do with him with it, whether it's like man zone, anything like that. So I'm going to take him here, and like as a CB2 opposite Quinion Mitchell, who he is like an athletic freak who can like
Yes,
travel with maybe some of the more athletically gifted guys. Like you're going to feel really good about like Delane Mitchell, Cooper DeJean with Vic
absolutely.
Fangio. It's gonna be pretty good. So
You couldn't picture a better spot for Mansour Delane. Like he doesn't have to step in and be the cornerback one. He gets to play beside like, guys
yeah.
who genuinely have that athleticism and be able to match just about anyone. So he doesn't have to take like the biggest crash course imaginable. So
Yeah.
I love that fit.
Yeah.
All right. The Browns need a receiver who is not built like like just rail thin. They need a guy who
hmm
can like give them some powerful, yak plays. And Omar Cooper brings that in just so many instances. Just a guy who can not just like play dependably in the slot. Like I think this is a player who potentially can project outside with how he handles like contact in his routes. I don't think he's someone who loses that much speed, but also like you watch him at the catch point, like just so many impressive plays, just being able to play through contact. We talk about it with Makai Lemon and a lot, but I feel like Cooper gets really like overshadowed and like almost like it's kind of weird to me because Cooper does play with like a lot of intensity as a blocker too. But
hmm
I feel like a lot of people like look at like Mendoza and the fact that he was playing with him and that maybe Cooper maybe should have produced even more. But I feel like Cooper might just be projected to the NFL as a better player than how he produced in college. And he's not an easy player to come up with a comp for sure. Like he's definitely one of those guys who's built like much more thick. And he forced like I think it was like 24 missed tackles on PFF according to, and I think that was like near tops for the receivers in this class. Like he's just a guy who plays with so much like contact balance, and that's really what the Browns need. They need that guy who could just turn a short gain into something like 5 yards, like turn 2 or 3 into 5, and
Yeah.
that will go a long way for the Browns. So
Yeah.
lock
I just did a full film room breakdown on Cooper. I was glad that you brought up like some of the stuff. Like I think people like the average person who like just gets into the draft like maybe after the season probably sees Cooper's usage last year as like, oh, like he's just a slack guy. Like he played Z the year before, and like he was the guy getting the he was the beneficiary on a lot of those back shoulder throws from Curtis Rourke. So I think him having a lot of success and being an ascending player in two different roles in college is really intriguing to me. Um, Cooper is a guy like without a ton of like what I would call like weaknesses. Do I think he can be a better technically refined blocker? Yeah, for sure. I don't think he's super explosive out of his break. He's not as twitched up, in my opinion, as a guy like Tyson is. But dude catches everything. He plays really, really tough, especially after the catch. The contact balance is pretty freaking absurd. Like I've seen some other like people drawing comparisons to some pretty special after the catch guys, but Cooper, like his ability to stay on his feet after contact and break tackles is awesome, man. So he's going to be a very, I would say, quarterback friendly player if he can improve some of the zone route running stuff. But yeah, I mean, at this round, I never really understood like the whole idea that he was going to be around in like the mid-second round. I don't think that that the tape is just shows too good of a player for that, in my
yeah.
opinion. Um, the Bears here, I honestly think that they still need more pass rushing help opposite Montez Sweat. But I'm actually going to take Emmanuel McNeil Warren here. Jaquan Brisker is a free agent. I actually
Yep.
know this because I was watching Jaquan Brisker film for a video that I'm going to do hopefully later in the week. Um, Warren was one of my favorite players coming out of summer. I actually got his name from someone at the Toledo program. It was like, hey, like this cat, like this is the next one. They've been really churning out some NFL caliber prospects. Warren, this dude can clang and bang in the box. I love him near the line of scrimmage. the playmaking skills are off the charts. I mean, we talked a little bit about
Absolutely.
Avion Terrell and some of the punch outs. I mean, Warren will literally leave his feet, Superman dive, and punch balls out from behind. Just he an incredible diving interception. I think I was at his podium and he was talking about the best play from his college career. I can't recall the game. I just know that it was snowing. He's playing from a half turn, ends up making a diving interception on the sideline. Like one of the best catches you'll ever see from a defensive back, especially given the circumstances. I did think that his 24 film was better than his 25 film just because he is a good striker, but I thought the tackling technique wasn't as good last year. And I also worry about him a little bit in like post safety rotations, like if he does end up having to like change directions and things like that. I think that he is like pretty fluid, like he's not stiff necessarily, but maybe not as fluid as you want in terms of changing directions. There was a couple times where, that kind of showed up where I felt like there was some big plays on the left on the field, but guy that can play top down, can play in the box, can fill a variety of roles, can play as like a big nickel in the slot too. The playmaking instincts are outstanding. I think there's enough zone coverage stuff. He is a bit of a gambler, so you just
Yep.
don't have to like. I sometimes question whether like he was guessing and that's how he was getting in some of these positions, or if it's just like really good instincts. It's kind of hard to tell. We'll see more of that at the next level. But McNeil Warren is a good player. I think that this is the more appropriate range, like the end of the first round for him to come off the board rather than like, I know he was like top 15 on some of the best draft media minds, like Daniel Jeremiah had him super high. I just think that's a little bit too rich for my blood personally. But here at 25 for Chicago as like a Brisker replacement for Dennis Allen, I'm all on board on that. I think it's a great fit.
No, definitely. They definitely got best instincts in this entire class. So
Yeah.
I think like athletic comp and like comps. I use Jesse Bates for another player, but
Mm-hmm.
I definitely see that potential with Emmanuel McNeil Warren.
Yeah.
Buffalo here. They just traded for DJ Moore. I know I shouldn't take a receiver.
Unbelievable. We're not going to go on that tirade, but an unbelievable fleece job for Ryan Paulson. Good
Absolutely.
for you, brother.
There's just not a lot of value lining up here at the other positions.
Mm-hmm.
But at wide receiver, it's really like aligned in terms of like what they can do. And I mean, you really can't go wrong with another receiver. I know Brandon Beane's not going to do this, but like I'm just taking Casey Concepcion here. Like, don't get me wrong, this is not like a flawless player by any means. I think he has very bad tendencies to have wide hands. We've talked about this with him, but this is one of the best characters in this entire class. Like, he understands what he needs to work on, and I think he really gets that. But he's also someone who stretches the field vertically, gives them like that type of playmaker. He's an unbelievable route runner. He's played in the slot before too. Like, go back to NC State tape where he's making like these catches over the middle, like in some just absolutely like condensed windows. And like, he's coming up with the catch, despite the fact he just got injured. He has a concussion now. Like, those are the types of plays you see from Casey Concepcion. You talk about him, like, I mean, I don't want to go too far into this, but just listening to him, speak at the combine and just all that, and talking about like, people with like like speech impediments, like, and stuff like that. And he clearly has just great character, football character. Give you a guy that goes into that locker room, can give you not just a leader, but also just like that potential upside playmaker, and a guy who gives maybe way more effort than maybe DJ Moore consistently. So I just think you go, yeah, for sure. But I mean, I just can't think of anything else right here. I really think this is just where the value of the board lined up. So go Casey Concepcion.
Oh boy. I've got a decision on my hands here for the Niners. Nick Bosa coming back from injury is something that I am very interested to see how that goes. I mean, Bosa's obviously been a great player, but coming off that injury is a little bit scary. Michael Williams, I think everyone that knew going into last year, if you're going to take him high, you're going to have to give him like a really, really long runway to develop as a pass rusher. Can probably be somebody with his link to be like an early down player. I thought that the Williams pick last year was a massive reach. I think that this is probably a little bit early from a value proposition. And I know that picking back to back edge rushers when you've already got like a superstar on a heavy contract is going to be frowned upon. But I am going to take Cassius Howe here.
Mm.
This fella, this fella is one of my favorite players in the entire draft. And I want him to be a good NFL player. So bad. One of my favorites from summer scouting. I have comped him to Nick Herbig. There are some similarities. I don't know if he's as good of a run defender as Nick Herbig is, who I
Yeah.
don't think is this disaster that maybe the Steelers coaching staff thinks. But this dude, this you talk about somebody that can run under a table full speed and been through contact, burst off the ball,
Yep.
bend, moves, everything that you want to see. Been extremely productive over the past 3 years. I know the Niners traded for Bryce Huff, and I think that Huff is a guy that some people may compare Cassius Howe to as like a potential DPR at the next level. I really want Cassius Howe to go to like a contending team, just because even if he's not going to be a player that's going to play 65, 70 snaps, if he plays 30, 35 snaps and those are like really, really valuable snaps on third downs, or hopefully you're a team that's going to be playing with a lead and you're going to be trying to like close out games. This dude's a 1v1 winner, man. Like
Yeah.
I think that his tape, really shows that. I mean, he gave some of the best tackles. I feel like some serious issues as well. So how I understand really short arms, probably a little bit early, but I like the fit here in like this system too, where he's just able to really pin his ears back and go, especially getting him to rush from a wide nine alignment. I'm in on that.
Yeah, I think you minimize the risk just by going to the Niners in terms of like what they got for like potential run defenders on like first and second down. Like how
Hmm.
can just slide in. Uh, I really don't know what to do with the Texans here. This is this is one of those where I genuinely don't really have a great idea of how to approach it. I would say Blake Miller would be my highest like available player right now, but I'm
Hmm.
not sure they need tackle help as much as they need guard help, and I don't like Blake Miller on the interior at all. Um
Could I interest you in a Caden Proctor pick?
that's what I've been thinking. Yes, that's generally what I've been thinking because
Hmm.
Proctor's tape on the outside is really inconsistent, but you look at his
Explosive fella.
power. Yes, explosive, powerful, just impossible to move off his spot if you put him in the interior. Like he's one of those guys that could genuinely just like he could change the interior of an offensive line. That is a tall guard. Like it's gonna be hard to see over a guy like that. But you want to bring that type of like potential upside. You want someone who can like be your tone setter because the Texans they don't have a tone setter on that offensive line. And that really like it really messed with them. A lot of people talk about CJ Stroud, but I feel like he's getting the ball out so fast because his offensive line is not able to hold up. And we've seen like what the Texans have been trying to do to build around that offensive line. Not so much is how I would describe it. And they've been trading away a lot of their best players on that
Yeah.
offensive line. It's just been very quizzical to how they've approached it. So I mean, give me a tone setter, give me a guy who's a potential like upside as an offensive guard. Like he has huge bust capabilities on the outside, but I feel like that goes down much more significantly if you put him on the interior.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think the question with Proctor is like he is really explosive in terms of like reaching his landmarks at pass pro, but like the reactive athleticism, like reacting to inside counters is something that, really concerns me. Like he's not a guy I don't think that can like afford to overset at the next level. I don't necessarily worry about the range. I just don't know if he has like the lateral mirror and ability to
Yeah.
hang out there. I think he probably could, with time on task. I do think that, moving him inside probably does minimize that a little bit. And then you still get the benefits of, the flexibility, the anchor, the ability to drive guys off the ball. The play strength is like outstanding. And I also think too, like, I think there's this idea that like maybe it's the helmet scouting that like he has to play in a phone booth like Tyler Booker, and like that's just not the case. Like this dude's a completely different athlete. I don't think he's necessarily maybe as technically sound as Booker was coming out last year, but similar grades for me personally. So I think that this is a pretty good spot, especially like the Texans. They got a lot of questions about like trying to get CJ Stroud back on track. That's going to be a heavy talking point in the national media just because of how he played
Yep.
last year. So, yeah, I think adding some insulation on the interior and giving you, like you said, a physical presence. They got to run the football, man. Like they've been, I mean, Woody Marks did some good things. There's not necessarily a running back here that's going to help them. I really think that they need to go get it back in free agency. Or, well,
They
they did just
they
trade
traded
for
for
David
David
Montgomery.
Montgomery.
I
Yep.
actually do. I do like that. Montgomery's got some wear and tear on his tires. He's an older guy, but probably that is probably a good move for them. Him and Marks are probably
Makes
a good enough
it
combo.
makes Woody Marks to like a better like fit with that team because he doesn't have to carry
Yeah,
the ball nearly as much because that was
yeah,
the problem with him. He just every single play, every single game, it felt like it was like he was coming out of the game just consistently
yeah,
with injuries.
yeah. Man, what do we do with the Chiefs? I think especially now that they've traded, even before they traded Trent McDuffie, I think that people have slept on how poorly constructed the Chiefs roster has been over the past like
Yes.
18 months. I think they've got way more holes. I think they've invested in guys that I just think like are not as good of players as they probably think they are. Like
Mhm.
prioritizing Nick Bolton, prioritizing George Karlaftis is just not things that I would have probably done last offseason. Taquan Thornton had some good moments for them last year on the perimeter. They need receiver help, man. Like
Yep.
they've had a bunch of twigs running out there. Rasheed Rice has been a completely different player in the pros than he was in college, and he's been an effective player, especially with the ball in his hands. It's kind of that slasher archetype,
Mhm.
but they need reliability. And I have some questions about like Denzel Boston, like out of breaks. Like, is he explosive enough to be a consistent like 1v1 winner? I do think that Boston plays big. Like he's a big receiver that plays big. He dunks on guys in the red zone. He does give them like this would be a different type of receiver than Patrick Mahomes has really worked with over the course of his career. Boston to me is a guy that I actually probably want to move around the formation more than like I feel like other people talk about him maybe as like more of a sacrificial or traditional X receiver. I do want to kind of move him around the formation a little bit. Like he will do some dirty work. He is really tough. So I think I actually have more questions about him against press. Like he's not super quick and he doesn't actually have like all that great of a release plan. He kind of just like comes off and is like, I don't care if you do latch on to me. I'm just bigger, stronger, and I'm gonna go dunk on you at the catch point. At the next level, we've just seen so many guys like flame out, like unless they improve the nuance of their game. Boston seems like a kid that he's gotten gradually better over the course of his career. I think he can be like a wide receiver too at the next level. And for a team that doesn't have really anybody that you probably feel great about for the
Yeah.
short term or long term, given Rice's legal trouble. This is probably the best that they're going to be able to do at this spot, given the board that's available to them here.
For sure. I may have gone a little bit of a different direction, but I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna like I think wide receiver in terms of
Yeah.
like taking one there makes a lot of sense. I feel like you know the Boston. It was one of those weird things where like I feel like he might end up falling out of the first round with how like how he's kind of being viewed right now. But
Hmm.
we'll see about that. I mean, I still like him, but he is definitely a player with some questions for sure.
Yeah.
Denver at 30. This one, I don't even know if they stay here. I really feel like they trade out of this spot because with their needs and the players that are available right now, I just don't think the value lines up. So
Hmm.
I really think they might trade with a team like the Arizona Cardinals, and the Cardinals just end up coming up for like Ty Simpson. Because they really need quarterback help and definitely would make a lot of sense. Maybe like one of their I don't know how to do compensation here. I would say like maybe like
Let
the
me look.
60.
You talk about what you like about Ty Simpson, and I'll look at the trade value to see what we need to do here.
All right, that works for me. Yeah. So for me with Ty Simpson, I think he has like pretty like his flight capability. I talk about fight or flight a lot with quarterbacks. I think his flight
Hmm.
capabilities in terms of being able to make guys miss inside the pocket and outside the pocket is really outstanding. He's one of those guys that just like understands like deception, and I really appreciate that about his game. I also think he's an incredibly smart player. This is
Hmm.
something I genuinely like appreciate the most about Ty Simpson. He runs that entire Alabama offense in terms of like the show. He does like all the like adjustments with like pass protection, making audibles, and they didn't have a run game to speak of. And that's something I thought was really impressive, was that Simpson basically had to do a lot of it on his own. And there's a Alabama was a very imperfect team. Like there was a lot of drops on tape uh, from plenty of different suspects, but one recurring one that we'll get into in 2027 with Ryan
Yeah.
Williams. Yeah, he had some issues there. Alabama's offensive line wasn't exactly perfect either in terms of being able to keep him upright, but he also, he kind of fell apart down the stretch in terms of like potential injuries. Like he wasn't able to sustain enough in the pocket, and you also saw one consistent issue with him was the accuracy. Like in terms
Hmm.
of like pure general placement, like it was okay, but in terms of like precision ball placement, sometimes these balls were like way too behind on the middle of the field. The vertical stuff just was devastating in terms of, I just don't think he understands like potentially like playing on time.
Trajectory.
Yes, trajectory a lot of the time. Like sometimes he's like trying to throw it with almost like too little like arc, and sometimes a little bit too much arc. And
Hmm.
a lot of it is because he's not very on time in the deep game. His timing is all over the place in terms of how he's like, he's hitching back there, taking a little too much time to load up. And he just doesn't quite have that arm to be able to like, make up for those timing differences. It's definitely
Hmm.
something to keep in mind with Ty Simpson, but he is a player who relies over the middle of the field. He will play on time in terms of just, throwing with anticipation. Like those things are with him, but you have to like the accuracy one is a potentially fatal flaw with him that you're going to have to
Yeah.
keep in mind.
And I know I've seen a lot of comps to like Brock Purdy just in terms of like the physical tools. It's just worth noting that like Brock did a lot of work going into the league at like speeding up his release, like working on his like mechanics overall. Also, like I think Brock is like, I think people don't understand like how quick Brock is, like outside the pocket, like quick twitch movements, hitching up in the pocket, being able to get out and play make. He has like outstanding playmaking instincts. I think that Simpson does throw well on the move. You mentioned like the anticipatory throws, like especially the first half of the season,
Yes.
testing tight windows over the middle of the field, operating full field progressions and things like that. He's played a little bit under center too, which is a little bit of a bonus. And I do think that, you know, people are going to say like, oh, he played at Alabama. It's a ton of talent. Like there's talent over there at Alabama, but like there were major inconsistencies across the board. Like run game was pretty putrid throughout the season. I think the pass protection like kind of came and went depending on the opponent, and even the
Yep.
receivers like Ryan Williams, super talented player, like had a lot of frustrating moments on tape. So I think with Simpson, the idea here is that you can, develop him and hopefully like, surround him in a good ecosystem. This is not a it's kind of tough because I don't think he's necessarily ready to play right away, but he has such little experience and like 1 year starters going into the league, like it's just a brutal track record, man. It's really tough to bet on. Late first round, early second round is probably like the most realistic kind of path. That's kind of where I've settled on him kind of going. Obviously, the Steelers
Yep.
are going to be linked there at 21 just because, they have questions at quarterback too. But there's stuff to like with Simpson. The accuracy stuff really, really bothers me. If you're going to be a quarterback without outstanding like traits to necessarily rely on, scatter shot accuracy is a huge red flag. But
Yeah.
everything in Simpsons, the thing is, it can go both ways. Everything in Simpsons profile is a small sample size, not just because of like just the total number of starts, but because he was injured down the stretch. So you can see, like he's almost an eye of the beholder type of prospect. You can probably talk yourself into this thing going a multitude of different directions, like you can with a lot of prospects. Him just more so, but it's a pretty big risk. I feel like in the first round, but I understand it. Arizona needs a quarterback. I would anticipate, they're going to do a lot of homework. They probably feel like they have a pretty blank palette on the offensive side of the ball. I could see
Yep.
them coming up. I ended up looking at the trade value. It looked like Arizona has pick 104, like one of the top day 3 picks to move down 4 spots. It seemed like it worked on most of the models, so I just kind of forced the trade. But
Gotcha.
all right. New England Patriots just released Stephon Diggs. I actually like their depth at receiver for the most part, though. I know that they're probably going to be big players for Alec Pearson free agency. Could definitely use a shakeup of the offensive line. Could probably stand to, move Will Campbell from tackle, I think, too. Oh, man. Linebacker would be something I would consider. Edge rusher, they've got Harold Landry. I know he's a big time Vrabel guy. Chaseon's like had like a weirdly good like kind of revival in the
Yeah,
past
that
couple of
one
years.
that came out
This
of
one's
nowhere.
tough. This one is tough.
Yeah.
Um, man, I'm really curious on where I want to go here. I think if there's one thing that I think in this mock draft that could end up looking wrong when the draft actually comes, I think because there's not as many like premier players. I think the NFL usually in situations like this leans towards just taking a lot of big people. So I'm
Yes.
gonna take Caleb Lomu here. This personally, full transparency, is too early for Caleb Lomu. I have a lot of questions about Caleb Lomu as a prospect, but I do think he's a smart player. He's got potential. I know there's like some people that are split on like if he's going to be a guy that like moves inside. But he does have a bit. I will say like his anchor. I trust his anchor better than I trust his anchor better than Fano's. So that's something that he has. He doesn't necessarily have, I feel like, as much technical savvy, like with his hands, not just the timing, but the placement of them. But he does have like pretty good grip strength. I think that, as a run blocker, he was just super inconsistent. But I look at, kind of the way that the Patriots have filled out this offensive line. Will Campbell on the other side is an outstanding run blocker. So you can he's a guy that you really want to shape your run game around. So, kind of complementary skill sets. Lomu's probably a little bit better in pass protection. Also, like pairing because of Campbell's issues, establishing first contact and letting guys into his frame and not being able to anchor consistently, you need somebody that's going to set a pretty firm dish on the other side. Like you can't have both tackles in the lap of the quarterback. So if he does have to play right tackle, I know Morgan Moses has been there, probably baseline solid starter, but he is getting up there in age. So Lomu would give them a guy that probably is going to be able to get them the best 5 guys on the field. And Drake May, MVP candidate last year, got to keep him healthy though, and they've got, I think, plenty of weapons to do it with. So I think Lomu makes sense.
Yep. Lomu definitely makes sense as an upside play. I might have gone Blake Miller if I was fully committed to turning Will Campbell into a guard. I think that's
Yeah,
probably where I would have gone, but I definitely get that full direction.
yeah.
Seattle, they have 2 free agents at cornerback in Josh Jobe and Woolen. So I'm gonna take one of the best corners in this class. Maybe it's early, maybe it isn't. Um, I really was impressed with Chris Johnson's tape. This is a guy who just has outstanding stop start, just change of direction, his ability to mirror like some of the worst routes I've ever seen where guys are running triple moves on him, but he still like stays patient, stays square in his technique. I really think Johnson is one of those guys that just impressed me the more and more I watched him. Full transparency, like some of my exposure to Johnson came from the combine initially, and I went back and watched more of his tape. And I really think this is a guy, like, despite him being a G5 prospect, I really think this is a guy that should go in the first round based off the tape and just what he's able to like do from mirroring guys in man coverage, off man coverage. Might not necessarily be like the most amazing fit, but he has outstanding ball skills, and he's just one of those players that makes a lot of sense at this part of the draft. The Seattle Seahawks are defending Super Bowl champions, and I really think this is a player that they should take at this spot. Maybe they could have taken a D'Angelo Pons, but I think Johnson
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense here.
Johnson is one of my guys in this class. Like I think that he's been underrated throughout the process. He was a team captain last year too. I thought that he looked really, really fluid in the positional drills, and I
Yeah.
think that you see that on film too. The ability to click and close, I think, is good. I think he plays to his size. I think that he's a guy that can play off coverage. He can press. He could play zone. I think that the instincts are there. There's just a lot to like. Route recognition, I think in man coverage is impressive. He's got his eyes in the right spot, can decelerate with route breaks, got some playmaking chops too. So
Yeah.
there's not a ton of weaknesses in Johnson's game. And I think, I'm very curious on how the league will feel about him.
Mhm.
He's somebody that I want to ask around about. He's also like a pretty good run defender. I think he only missed a couple tackles this past year too. So he was someone that I mocked to the Steelers in the second round before the combine. But I think like with the way that he, performed in Indy, plus with just like how I think he's going to knock away interviews and knock out interviews out the park. I don't know if he actually gets there. So
Also
that
played on
is a
special
wrap.
teams too. I
Yeah,
mean,
and plays a lot of special teams. Like I said, like I just think checks a ton of boxes. And for the Seahawks, there's so much. I mean, there's so many directions that they can go. They're losing some guys in free agency, but that defense is like it was unbelievably great this past year, and I don't see them like necessarily slowing down. I think if anything, it'll be the offense that probably regresses a little bit next year, depending on like what their personnel actually ends up looking, and losing Kubiak, but definitely going to be one of the favorites. I feel like in the NFC. So that was a lot longer than we anticipated, but that's just typically how things go. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Definitely let us know in the comments your favorite picks, any questions, anything like that. We appreciate it. Like the video on your way out. And I will probably check you guys tomorrow, probably do some more free agency content in preparation for next week. So we'll see you guys very soon. Peace and love.